when the odds to risk ratio kind of tilts out of your favor, that's a game that you should not play. When it is in your favor, then you should play that game. You should make that investment, and you should sort of try to calculate, how many times or how much of the same bet, or would you increase your bet, and so forth.
Life is an endless stream of challenges, but no worries. Manuj is bringing the world's best minds right here for you.
My gosh, Manuj, you just blew my mind.
Thank you, universe. Manuj, thank you.
I'm so grateful.
It makes me feel a bit better.
Thank you.
Bootstrapping your dreams is here to give you what you need to succeed.
Hello and welcome to this new episode of Bootstrapping Your Dreams Show. I'm your host Manuj Aggarwal, and today we'll be talking with Matt Oguz. So Matt is a growth stage investor in technology and life science companies. His investment portfolio includes names like Lyft, Lemonade, Ripple, Carbon, Circle, Stockfolio. He's known for being a thought leader in quantitative investment methods in venture capital and private equity. Matt is the founding partner at Venture Science. Venture Science was established in 2013 and is headquartered in Palo Alto, California. This company has pioneered the data-driven quantitative approach to venture capital, cloud infrastructure, networking, security, gaming, VR, and drone technology, which are just a few innovations Venture Science invests in. Aside from all these, Matt is also the chief investment officer for the Iris Family Office. The Iris Family Office invests in multiple asset classes and takes direct positions in those classes. The family office deploys a quantitative investment strategy once again and is unconstrained in terms of stage or sector. Matt is outspoken about his approach and shares his valuable thoughts as a columnist on TechCrunch. Matt is a person of multiple talents, with his profession revolving around analytics, behavior economics, decision sciences, and AI. And Matt is obviously a successful investor, entrepreneur, a decision theorist, and writer. Welcome, Matt. I'm so excited to have you.
Hi, Manuj. So nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. So you've had a very interesting journey. From what I know, you came from a different country, or you have a background from Turkey, I believe. So go ahead, please.
Yes, correct. I'm Turkish American. I'm an immigrant, just like many other very successful people here in San Francisco Bay Area, Silicon Valley, and in America.
Awesome. So can you walk us through your journey? Like how did it all happen? How did you get to this point, being an immigrant? What kind of challenges did you face? Something about your backstory.
Oh God, I mean, once you ask me that question, I don't know where to start. But I've been here 25 years now, and I originally came as an exchange student, and then studied here. I received my master's degree. I received my MBA. During my studies, I focused on what's also called as decision theory or decision analytics. Back then it was called decision sciences, or has different names, but essentially the discipline of trying to make better decisions, using instead of sort of what we call common sense or heuristics, using models, using theories, using math. How could we make better decisions across really all facets of our lives? And how could we avoid some of the common biases? Obviously, the journey of every immigrant, including myself, is not just a straight line from point A to B. It has many twists and turns and ups and downs. But throughout the journey, we all learn, and myself personally appreciate everything that America has to offer, and this great country has to offer all of us. And I believe this is the best place to do it, to do whatever you're working on best, whether that's entrepreneurship, investing, or if you want to be a chef or a cook or brain surgeon. It's just the journey itself is exciting. It's not always glamorous, but with a little bit of perseverance and luck, I think good things happen. And that's kind of where I am today.
Yeah, no, these are great points. Being consistent and just overcoming those challenges, whatever comes your way, that's the way to go. So, and obviously, America is where everybody wants to be, even though I'm not in America right now. But you brought up a really good point about decision science. So, we all make decisions all day long, and especially in business and in personal life, there's so many variables that affect our decisions. Generally, we take decisions on just randomly, basically based on our experience. We are very impulsive about decision making. So how do you see the world differently? How do you even figure out what are the factors that you need to consider before you can make a decision?
Well, first of all, in order for something to be a meaningful decision, something of value has to be at stake.
Mm-hmm.
That's often money, but it could also be time. You're in your car, you have nothing to do. Where do you go? There's not a lot at stake there. But for example, during time of COVID, do you go home or do you maybe stick around, drive around a little bit longer?
Mm-hmm.
So all these are decisions that we deal with every single day. Sometimes these are personal decisions. Sometimes these are decisions that impact the people around us. Sometimes they impact your company. Oftentimes these decisions impact your bank account. A very good example of it is, the decision to buy a house. Right now, fortunately, there are a lot of parameters. You can go on any one of the search platforms, and then you can put your price point. But at the end, you'll come across a number of homes. You want a good school. You have a certain budget. No one has unlimited, unlimited amount of money in the bank, with the exception of maybe some people. But even companies like Apple today, with hundreds of billions of dollars in the bank, they sell bonds. So clearly they go through a decision-making process in terms of whether to use the money they have in the cash, or should they sell a bond at a very low interest rate, given that the interest rates are low today, and take advantage of this favorable macroeconomic situation. They don't just take their money out of the bank and go invest it in something. And so even they go through the math. And so, when you're buying a house, you look at the schools, you look at the square footage, how many rooms, how many bedrooms. But, at the end, we all like the house with a backyard and a tree, and the backyard looks like our grandmother's backyard.
Yeah.
And so we're drawn to that. We're drawn to that, experience. Maybe that has some value too, and maybe we should consider the sentimental value that it brings and what that's worth. And it's very, very difficult to determine that. But putting that aside, at any given point in time, you have a number of choices, and each choice has a certain payoff. And in some cases, these choices could also be assigned to probabilities or certain outcomes. You're going to do something, you don't know the outcome yet. It's sort of like gambling. You don't know where the ball's going to land on the roulette table, so to say. And every time they spin that roulette wheel, the ball lands on a different number, which has no bearing on the next spin. So in theory, the ball could land on the same number. It could land on 13 over and over and over and over again, maybe every time they spin. Theoretically, this could happen. But in practice, the ball lands on different numbers. And you're out there, you're having fun. But if you really want to go geek out about it, which is the case in some rocket scientists back in the 70s and the 80s, as they thought that they would create a device that would look at the spinning roulette wheel and try to sort of come up with an estimate on where the ball, or at least what range of that roulette wheel the ball might land. And so if you can estimate that the ball's going to land somewhere in this region, And interestingly, on the roulette wheel, the numbers aren't next to each other. They're scattered around to confuse people more. And so with that, they try to calculate, and then they say, well, if we have an edge over the roulette table now, then how much of our money should we bet? Do we bet all of our money or a portion of our money? How many hands should we play? How many times should we? 30 times, 50 times, 100 times? So as you can see, the calculation and the intricacies start getting deeper and deeper and deeper. And from that group, really luminaries of odds making, luminaries of gambling, luminaries of hedge funds today emerged. And even some of the most well-known investors today use some of the theories and the ideas that come out of that whole game that started out with just these PhD scientists go. And so to go back to your original question, there has to be something at stake. And so you start out with figuring out what is it here that's at stake and how much of that. And then from there, are there any elements of probability? Are there any elements of, and then are there any elements of payoff here? In my situation where I make investment decisions, as part of my job, there's always a bet, an investment that we make. There's the odds of, if you're a startup investor, for instance, which is what I used to do, but we don't do startups anymore. And that's because a full failure rate of a startup has gone from 48% to over 75%. So, the odds of losing your money have increased tremendously. And so the payoff, on the other hand, has not gone up that high. And so when the odds to risk ratio kind of tilts out of your favor, that's a game that you should not play. When it is in your favor, then you should play that game. You should make that investment, and you should sort of try to calculate, how many times or how much of the same bet or would you increase your bet and so forth. And that's sort of some of the elements without going into, it could take a very, very long time to discuss all the details and intricacies. But to start out, what's at stake here? What am I going to get out of that situation? What happens if things go wrong? What happens if everything works out to my favor? What return do I get? That's really the basis of it.
That's great. Thank you for explaining it. And one thing I want to highlight here, which really resonated with me, is like a lot of people, get into the habit of this happened earlier, so it's gonna repeat. So what you said, there is no whatever happened in the past has absolutely no bearing on what may happen in the future.
In some cases, you're right, but in some other cases, something that happens in the past actually has a bearing in what's going to happen in the future. Wow. A good example of that is the game of blackjack, for instance, because there's a set number of cards. The cards that are played out of this deck has an impact on which cards are remaining in the deck. And so in that case, that does have bearing, but in other cases, it doesn't. And so, it's important to, if I learn one thing, the expected value calculation is often good, but it's something that we often don't want to do. Mm-hmm. I don't want to go home right now. I want to go to Starbucks. Maybe I go in there and get a cup of coffee. Or maybe I get a cappuccino. I know I'm really not supposed to eat sugar, but that coffee cake looks really good. Should I get that? And that sort of thing. And that's okay. That's life. I mean, we're all human beings. We're all here on this in this life to not just do math all the time, but really enjoy ourselves a little bit. But in serious situations, if it's about buying a house, picking a school, determining, which, if you receive multiple job offers, which offer to take, which major to choose, these are important things. And these important decisions come every so often, and they have a long tail of impact for many years in what you do. And, myself and all of us have made errors and decisions, and sometimes the results could take a long time to fix. And sometimes you make a very good decision, and then you enjoy the results for a very, very long time too.
That's
true.
That's great. So I'm guessing that you took all this information that you have and sort of applied it to venture capital and came up with a model to figure out how to optimally deploy your capital. Is that correct?
I did it. That's exactly what I did. I mean, the first thing that I did was, how could I create a model, a selection model, where if I have 50 companies that I'm looking at, that I can identify the different attributes, different dimensions of these companies on a consistent basis. So I can't change my parameters, all the time. So I have to define. The effort is defining your parameters in the very beginning, and so you're consistent as you're running all of these companies through your models. And so you hear things like people evaluate companies. They say, well, there's just something that I don't like about that. See, that's a problem, because you want to know what it is to sort of like kind of take a step back on your own, and what is it that kind of bothered me, or what is it that enticed me to do this? And it's really in your benefit to try to identify what that is. Write it down, put it in the model. You can improve your models over time, which is what we do. We use what's called a multiple criteria decision analysis, or multifactor analysis. It's essentially the discipline of going into a situation where there are multiple factors. Some of them are easily quantifiable. Some of them are qualitative factors, but there are methods around quantifying a softer factor too. So, for instance, you can look at historical data, and you can maybe try to calculate whether a two-founder startup has better odds of being successful, or a single founder, or a three-person team. And so, you can try to do those maths, or if you're lacking data, you can come to a consensus internally or within your group, but let that consensus be the basis for how you evaluate these startups. And then later on, you can change them, you can readjust them. That's okay. But what doesn't work is essentially not having any set of parameters. I trust my gut feeling. I'm a visionary kind of approach to go in, to forecast sort of the future. Nobody has a crystal ball, and that's a failure for economic loss. That's a recipe for economic loss in that situation. So we use multi-factor analysis across 40, 45 parameters that we identified. And then we also do a lot of math for how much capital should we deploy on a given situation. And that's also a lot more relevant perhaps for sort of portfolio type funds. We do all of our investments on a single investment basis. We typically, generally speaking, don't form portfolios, and we try to create these investment structures where they're not really correlated or connected to one another. And that's another discussion. But essentially, there are many tools available. Multi-factor analysis is, you can look it up. You can buy a textbook. There's software out there that you can use, and you can even apply to, like I said, the decision of where to buy a house or which house to buy.
That's great. You are listening to Bootstrapping Your Dreams Show with Manuj Aggarwal. Businesses face numerous challenges like finding the right product market fit, determining the market size, implementing a winning go-to-market strategy, crafting customer-centric USP, comparative analysis, looking for funding, building up cash flow and profitability. We have made a lot of free resources available to the entrepreneurial community, including this podcast. We invite you to check out our websites and follow us on social channels. The links are in the show notes. We hope you find the resources useful and utilize them to grow your business. We also have some programs for entrepreneurs. If you find our content useful, then you will definitely find the programs outstanding. So do check them out. And so after going through this exercise, after evaluating, probably dozens and dozens of startups, what are some of the top factors that you have determined that contribute to the success of a startup?
Well, I mean, to me, for a startup, for seed stage investing, I think the number one factor that I discovered, not that I discovered, but to me, like what my analysis showed is actually the state of the product. If the product's ready, if the product's sort of working early on, versus a situation where they're still trying to figure out what the product is, or they're still trying to build it. If the product is built, I mean, that's pretty powerful. I mean, they can tweak the product. Think about it. Just in the case of some of the names that some of the companies we use every day, Uber and Lyft. I mean, if you think about it, it probably isn't that difficult to slap together code that would match a driver to someone looking for a ride. Now, from there, of course, it gets more and more complicated. Optimizations, payoffs, promotions, all that comes kind of later on. But in the very beginning, that core product is ready, and I think that's very, very important. I think if startups could figure that out, then they can expand. I mean, even if you think about the very first iPhone, I don't remember if it had a camera. I don't think it had, or did it have a camera?
I think it did.
I think it had a camera, right? It did have a camera, but it didn't have copy paste, for instance.
Yeah.
Copy paste came much later on.
Yeah.
You would get a text message and it would always show up on your screen. There was no privacy around it, none of those issues and so forth. And this is Apple. So they started with a core working product and they went from there. There were a lot of objections. Well, it doesn't do this, it doesn't do that. Yeah, that's right. It didn't do all of that. And it could probably still do a lot more, but the core of it was right there. And I think that's huge. And from there, of course, you want to pick a big enough market where your sort of product fits into that market, into that situation. You decide whether you want to go after high number of transactions with often comes with smaller margins, or lower number of fewer transactions, perhaps with higher margins. We look at gross margins too. I mean, gross margins, if you have a high transaction, a high gross margin, I mean, a good example of it would again be maybe a cloud service provider like AWS. And these are solid, high margin businesses with everybody on there. And so you can see the result very easily as all those companies reflect into the stock market and the valuation that they're able to command. Of
course. Great. Thank you so much for that. And now you've been part of some really, household names, Lyft and Lemonade and Ripple. Some of these companies have went on for an IPO. So can you tell us your experience of, most people who are looking to invest, they are always looking for these big names before they become big, right? Because before they became the household names. How do you spot these opportunities?
Well, I mean, Lyft and Lemonade, they were different. In the case of Lyft, I actually wrote an article, on TechCrunch. If you guys go Google my name on TechCrunch, it's a duopoly situation, where you have like a Coca-Cola, Pepsi,
Yeah.
kind of a situation. And for the entry point that we had into the investment vis-a-vis Uber, we felt that Lyft gave us a better bang for the buck.
I see.
And so, in that situation, it was where there are two companies in play, two disruptive companies offering not similar services, but the identical service. I mean, the same driver drives for both companies in the same car. So that's the identical service. And that carries with it certain elements, certain characteristics. In the case of Lemonade, for instance, it's a disruptive company into an age-old industry, being insurance. And so, I wanted to do Lemonade for a long time, and we were just trying to figure out a way to get involved, in that situation through my connections and some of the people that I met. We were able to acquire shares in a secondary transaction, and Lemonade. We're a Lemonade customer as well for our home insurance, and I think they're great people. They're wonderful to work with, wonderful to know. I was involved with that company a lot more than my involvement with Lyft. I mean, Lyft much bigger, and really didn't have much time. But I was involved a little bit more with the folks at Lemonade, and essentially we're here today, and the stock's still doing well, and the company's continues to disrupt. For those of you who are fans of decision theory, Dan Ariely is actually with Lemonade. I mean, I believe he's a advisor to the company, and so he's a well-known author in that space. And so they do a lot of innovative things in terms of onboarding customers and also handling claims to lower their loss ratio. And I think they do it better than anybody else that's out there. And so, smaller market cap, obviously, in comparison to, Snowflake or, Airbnb and so forth. But it's just a good example of just watching a company try to disrupt an age-old industry, and they were able to do that. So let's see where the company goes.
That's great. And so let's talk about the other topic, which is you also invested in Ripple and crypto and AI. Where do you see these technologies are going, especially now, when digitization of everything has been rapidly accelerated?
Well, blockchain and cryptocurrencies. I'm a believer of blockchain technology. Obviously, that's a very straightforward proposition to keep records of a number of events that happen one after another. So, for example, whether that's funds transfer or document storage or a series of things that you have to kind of gather together to make a transaction work. So, in terms of the blockchain. In terms of blockchain as a technology, I'm a big believer of that. Now, the cryptocurrencies, whether it's Bitcoin, XRP, Ethereum, some of the other altcoins and so forth, I think the writing's still on the wall. I think I don't know where everything will kind of fall together in terms of whether Bitcoin would become a mainstream. Because at the end of the day, it's a man-made computational cryptography-driven product where hashing and cryptography is at the core of it. So that's only as good as the current computers that we have aren't able to crack, the code that's behind it. But I think on the forefront of that, I saw three technologies, and I still believe in that today. Blockchain kind of took a back seat to some of the others, but artificial intelligence, although that's not really, I think that's really part of game theory and decision theory. It kind of came, I remember taking a class in AI, and when I revisited some of the courses recently, it was still the same thing. So these are not really brand new, algorithms. I mean, they've been around a long time. But quantum computing is brand new. I mean, quantum computing, I think, is really disruptive. And if we had quantum computers, then it would be then they would have to really change a lot of things about these cryptocurrencies as well, because those quantum computers can crack that hashing code in a shorter period of time than it is possible right now. So they're kind of arch enemies in that regard. But quantum computing only solves certain types of problems. They're very good for solving optimization problems, and so these technologies are really on the forefront. And computation is really what we need the most, because when you tackle really difficult problems, for instance, even drug development, vaccine development, you end up needing to solve a very complex math problem. And the other end would be like brute guessing or letting it run for a long period of time. In certain situations, something could run for 3-4 days with today's computing power and then maybe solve it. Of course, that time's getting shorter and shorter. But in some other circumstances, the reason why we're not able to immediately solve, virus vaccines or cancer or some of the other diseases, because these computations we cannot solve with today's computing power. So with quantum computing, I'm hopeful that we'll be able to make faster calculations, faster computations, something that takes 3-4 days. If that could be done in a matter of days or minutes or seconds or milliseconds, which is the direction it's typically headed. But to get there takes a long time, obviously.
Yeah, for sure.
And so these technologies, I'm always bullish on. These are deep tech companies. But in the meantime, while these deep tech companies are happening, while these moonshots are being worked on, in the meantime, there's still opportunities in mainstream business disruption. And we see that every day. And Lemonade is an example of that. Lyft's an example of that.
That's great. And so one question I want to ask is, we are obviously going through a humongous change as a species, economically, public health wise. What are some of the long-term effects of this pandemic and a socially distant economy that we are finding ourselves in? How is the tech startup scene or investment scene is going to change, or what are the long-term effects on the business itself?
Well, I mean, so, all the governments around the world, including our own government, infused a lot of cash into the economy during this time. So this increased the money supply tremendously in the economy. And so the long-term effects of that money supply will hopefully have a positive impact on the economy as a whole, and then on the markets as well. So if you split, the realm of investing into companies, into equities, into two parts. One part would be public equities. They're publicly traded. They did their IPOs. And then the other part is kind of what I'm more interested in, private companies. We want to invest them before they become publicly traded so that we capture a bigger upside here. And so the private companies, your startups, your growth stage companies, they are part of that funnel that leads into publicly traded companies. And, here in the US, the publicly traded companies, the stock market here is the number one, investment product in the world. Mm-hmm. And so just the way the stock market is structured, the level of trust that's inherent in both the economy and the stock market. But going forward, the Federal Reserve and the regulators should really be very, very careful about these macroeconomic forces in play, these monetary factors. Fortunately, we found ourselves in a situation where inflation has not yet kicked in because there was supply overage. There was a lot of supply. So if you want to buy, a sweater or a T-shirt, you can go to Amazon today and it gets cheaper every day. It doesn't get more expensive.
Yeah.
But in the 80s and the 90s, or in the 80s, 70s, during the times of inflation, you didn't have that. I mean, you had one company that made something. So now we have excess supply in the world that's kind of holding inflation under control. And so I think, aside from obviously the sad elements of the fact that so many people have lost their lives and so many people have been sick and ill and now trying to recover, the health element aside, the economic elements are significant, and the governments around the world have increased the money supply in the world. So hopefully that supply will turn into rebuilding perhaps some of the infrastructure. I mean, if you look at the infrastructure in America, the roads, the highways, they were built a long time ago, and you drive around, they're not in very good shape. So perhaps all of that needs to be updated and upgraded, and all that takes money. And so I think first and foremost, we have to get past this phase of the more antiviral medication to attack somebody who gets COVID, and also the outcome of the vaccinations, hopefully making the world a better place in terms of addressing that. And I'm also a big advocate of, once we get past that, I think we should still be a little maybe cleaner. I mean, airports, airplanes and everything, it was not very clean anywhere around the world. I mean, the travel experience, when I was, traveling as a teenager, or, as a young person, was very enjoyable. I mean, that's changed tremendously. So hopefully that'll get a little bit better. Hopefully, these places will get a little bit cleaner too, and stay that way for a long time.
Let's hope so. And now, are you seeing any new types of products, new types of services, and business models changing because of what is happening out there?
Well, I mean, it's very interesting also, both encouraging and interesting, that we find ourselves in the state, the COVID pandemic era, where everybody has internet access. Mm-hmm. So everybody is connected. Can you imagine if the same thing happened, and actually it did happen right throughout history? There was no internet, nothing. So people couldn't evolve, couldn't adapt. But now people do, and people meet new people. They have a retail business. It's very easy to take that retail business online. If you're a wine shop, yes, nobody's coming in, but you can create a wine club very easily. Digitize whatever you're doing. Unfortunately, if you're a barber, you're not going to be able to digitize that. But even that, I've watched quite a few videos on how to cut your own hair, how to cut your kids' hair, and some of these videos have been watched, over 1 million times. And obviously those people made a little bit of money from that too. Maybe they made a lot of money. And so the digital world now just supercharged came to the forefront, because of the pandemic. Maybe people were kind of, neglecting that a little bit. Well, I need to be on, maybe I put a video out on YouTube, maybe I write an article. Now people are doing that. So the digital economy has picked up tremendously, and those tools are available for anyone to use. And so business models, that electronic economy really sped up tremendously. That's very encouraging, because that's very efficient. You can create a digital product, whether it's a video game, if you know how to do one, or maybe it's a book, anywhere around the world, and you can sell it to someone using your own website or a third party third-party company, that there's a marketplace and so forth. And so this is very, very encouraging altogether.
That's great. Very, very useful insights there. Thank you so much for sharing. So that was the last question. This was a very fun, a lot of unique insights that you shared. So thank you so much for that and for your time. And now, if people want to reach out to you, connect with you, how can they do that?
Well, they can just add me on LinkedIn. I mean, I'm active on LinkedIn. I love LinkedIn. I connect with a lot of people on there. I think the platform is just a beautiful platform to use. I enjoy it. Just add me on LinkedIn, drop a quick note, let me know what you're working on. If there's anything I can do to help, more than happy to help.
Awesome. That's great. Thank you so much, Matt.
Well, thank you, Manuj. Everybody stay safe, and thank you for joining in.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, I'm Sarah, producer of the Bootstrapping Your Dreams show. This episode has come to an end. Don't forget to check out the episode show notes for the links to the resources mentioned in this episode. Thanks for tuning in. Until the next episode, goodbye. Keep going and keep winning.